This is the new normal.
Prices are at record levels.
Severe lack of inventory.
Used car prices are at their highest in more than 50 years.
The average price of a used car has gone up 30% in the last year. The last time car prices were this volatile was 1974, and back then, they only went up 12%. But what happened? Why are car prices shooting up in value? Well, it turns out that car makers can't build new cars fast enough, so used cars are in insane demand. But their only job is to build cars, so why can't they build enough of them? The easy answer would be the pandemic, but the real answer is a little bit smaller than that. How small? Well, about 10 nanometers, give or take. Because the reason we can't afford cars anymore is the microchip shortage. So let's dig into why we don't have any microchips and take a look at the perfect storm of things going wrong that led to every automaker on the planet not being able to build cars. Well, every automaker except for one. I'm Guff, this is Alban, let's get started. Before we begin, we are once again giving away $1,000 to a random subscriber who drops a comment below. So hit that red button and leave us something clever. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. Hey, what's up, man?
Oh, nothing much. Just working on a little something for the new ride.
New ride?
Just dropping an overclock tune on the new Tesla. Daddy Elon thinks that the Plaid is the fastest out there. He ain't gonna know what hit him.
Wait, you're tuning your car here? On this public Wi-Fi?
Yeah, why? You seeing this?
Does that guy look a little sketchy to you?
You see my Tesla out there, man?
Oh, you know what?
What?
You should have been using Atlas VPN.
Atlas, what?
I'm glad you asked. Atlas VPN is a tool for your devices that encrypts your data and hides your virtual location. And hey, they're the sponsor for this video. When you connect to a VPN server, your device is given a new DNS and IP address. All of your traffic is encrypted and routed through the VPN. Your data goes to Atlas VPN servers, the server then decrypts that information and then sends it along to the right destination. This keeps you safe and has the bonus of giving you access to websites and media at any of Atlas VPN's servers.
You gotta help me, man.
All right. Check this out. With Atlas VPN, you can connect to a VPN overseas, like in the UK, and use it to watch awesome region-locked content, like Rick and Morty on Netflix. And it works on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, so you can stay secure on all of your devices. Plus, with Atlas VPN's data breach monitor, you can see if any of your emails, passwords, or other sensitive information have been involved in any data breaches.
Oh, pretty cool. So how does this help me?
It doesn't. I hope you had insurance. Currently, Atlas VPN has a huge discount on their 3-year plan for just $1.39 a month. And they're so sure you'll love it, they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. This deal won't last for long, so don't end up like Zan over here and hit the link in that video description. By the way, you should try tweeting at Elon. I hear he loves modified Teslas. Now back to the video. 2019, the automotive industry was on a strong run, one that had been consistent for a decade since the brutal financial crisis of 2008. But automakers weren't the only ones thriving. The tech industry was on a roll, with new smartphones out, updated laptops, and plans for a whole new generation of video game consoles coming the very next year. Needless to say, manufacturers of all these products were ramping up production in order to meet the expected demand. And then 2020 happened.
The coronavirus forcing millions more Americans into virtual lockdown. Over 75 million people ordered to stay at home.
The pandemic flipped the entire planet upside down, and worldwide lockdowns put a halt on almost every single industry. Manufacturing was possibly one of the worst hit. Containing the spread of COVID meant that densely staffed manufacturing facilities, especially ones in Asia, were shutting down completely. This meant that technology companies and automakers alike had to rely on existing stock in order to keep up sales. But considering the fact that everyone was stuck at home, that was probably okay, right? Wrong. Stay-at-home orders meant that people not only needed to be able to live at home, but also work and go to school at home. This meant that people needed new computers, monitors, televisions, video games to keep them entertained, headphones to drown out their kids or loved ones. So, alright, they needed all those things, but at the very least, people were at home, so they didn't need cars. Well, not exactly. The first couple months of the pandemic had most people not leaving home except for the most essential things. Automakers foresaw this and slowed down car production significantly, to the point of canceling orders for components that went into these cars. cars. But by May of 2020, people realized they still needed to get around places, but things like public transport or ride sharing were still too high risk. And so we needed cars again, and demand shot back up to pre-pandemic levels. Now, this is generally great news for any business whose products come into high demand, but there was a problem. Neither tech companies nor automakers could make their products fast enough to keep up with this ever-rising demand. And for both of those industries, it boiled down to one teeny tiny thing: microchips. Now, as you may be aware, there are microchips or semiconductors in pretty much everything these days. These tiny little pieces of hardware are used in computers for a multitude of tasks, and are pretty much the building blocks for every single device on the planet. Your phone, your laptop, alarm clock, television, camera, and yes, even your car consists of a number of microchips, many of which serve different purposes in that device. Add to that the fact that a lot of car makers flat out canceled their orders back in March due to production slowdowns, which meant that when they reordered chips in May, they were at the bottom of the list. Who was at the top of the list? Well, it was the tech companies, of course. They continued to pile in orders thanks to all the work from homers, virtual school kids, and just bored quarantiners. All this meant that car makers were quickly running out of inventory at their dealerships. And no matter how much people wanted cars, they simply didn't have enough to sell to them. The chip shortage continued to demolish automakers through 2020. Nearly every car manufacturer on the planet was closing down their production facilities due to a lack of parts. Cars like the Audi Q7, Porsche Cayenne, Chevy Camaro, Ford Bronco, Jaguar F-Type, Dodge Durango, Mercedes C-Class, all of their production lines were being halted simply because there weren't enough chips to go around. Even the Ford F-150s, America's best-selling vehicle, were being parked in the factory parking lots by the thousands simply because they couldn't get the chips for one or two of the modules inside of the car. It got so bad that Ford was offering buyers $50 if they were okay with getting an F-150 that didn't have auto start-stop functionality, simply because they didn't have the specific chips to build them with that feature. To add fuel to the fire, so to speak, Renesas Electronics, one of the biggest chip makers in Japan, had a massive fire at their biggest production facility. A huge section of their factory was burned to the ground, with dozens of machines destroyed. And their critically important clean room, a necessary part of making chips, was covered in soot and smoke from the fire. It seemed like there was truly no end in sight for this nightmare of a situation. Dealerships in the US quickly realized that they didn't have enough new cars on the lot, with inventory to sales ratios at the lowest that they had ever been. And so they decided to fill their lots with the only other option they had: used cars. If there weren't new cars available to consumers, well, then they just have to buy used cars. And so dealerships started going out of their way to contact old customers and buy up any used cars that they could find. They would clean them up, mark up the price, and sell them off to anyone that they could. And it was working. The used car market exploded to meet that customer demand. And as we all remember from our economics class, high demand and limited supply means one thing: higher and higher prices. Unlike new cars, which have an MSRP or manufacturer suggested retail price, used cars can be sold for however much you want. And if you didn't want to pay the inflated used car prices, well, then you could buy a new car. But slow production meant months-long wait times before the car could get produced and then trucked to your nearest dealership. And so the prices of even the most basic grocery getters began to creep further and further up month by month, as used car dealers kept inflating prices to take advantage of the feverish need for Americans to own a car. By the beginning of 2021, used car prices were up 30% from the previous year. This was the highest year-over-year increase of used car values ever, with the previous most drastic increase happening in 1974, which was about 12%. But consumers at this point had no choice. You simply couldn't buy a new car because no manufacturer could build them fast enough. Well, that is, except for one. Toyota, one of the great innovators of modern manufacturing, developed the just-in-time manufacturing method back in the 1930s. This method was a tightly controlled system of making cars where the parts and individual components that a car needed to be built came to the factory right before they needed to be there, aka just in time. This meant that Toyota never needed to stock more parts than were needed at any given moment. This method, also called lean manufacturing, was eventually adopted by pretty much every automaker on the planet. Ford, GM, Honda, Nissan, everybody uses a permutation of this method. Well, apparently, except for Toyota. Let me explain. In 2011, a powerful earthquake rocked the coast of Japan and sent massive tsunami waves all across the main island. As you guys may know, the Fukushima nuclear power plant was hit particularly hard, causing the worst nuclear accident to occur since Chernobyl. That nuclear power plant was a huge supplier of power for a significant portion of Japan, a portion that was home to the Renesas Electronics Corporation, one of the main microchip suppliers for Toyota. The Renesas chip factory was shut down because of a lack of power for 3 months. Understandably, this pretty much decimated Toyota's supply chain and led to massive chip shortages that rendered Toyota's manufacturing facilities useless because they didn't have enough chips to build all the cars. Toyota quickly went to work finding new suppliers for their chips. But at the same time, they also took a look at the supply chain as a whole to find out what parts were most at risk, just in case a disaster like this happened again. They eventually came up with a list of nearly 1,500 parts that were considered high risk, and they determined that these parts needed to be stockpiled, and microchips were pretty high up on that list. And on top of that, Toyota put together an intricate system that closely monitored all of the suppliers that serviced their factories. This system was so detailed that it could determine there was going to be a supplier problem before it even happened. It did this by looking at factory output, geopolitical climate, weather events all over the world. It was so detailed that even for a single headlight, Toyota knew the names and locations of all of the suppliers that created the lubricant that went on the rubber gaskets of the headlight. It's pretty safe to say that this system was ready for any potential disaster. And you know what word really succinctly describes the year 2020? Disaster. 2020 rolled around and disease outbreaks in China met unrest in the Middle East, and Toyota's system was monitoring all of this. So what they started to do was build up stock of their most important and at-risk parts from the beginning of the year. And so by the time May rolled around, they were one of the few manufacturers that didn't get absolutely demolished by the microchip shortage. They had a few temporary closures here and there, but for the most part, Toyota cars were being pumped out of the factories at a normal enough rate. Although normal enough was simply not enough. And the huge demand in the later half of 2020 meant that Toyotas were flying off the lots. But Toyota held on and had enough stock to keep making cars. That is, until just now. As of August of 2021, Toyota's stock of microchips is almost completely depleted. And through September, they're expecting to reduce production by up to 40% globally. All because they can't get their hands on those dang chips. So clearly, we're not out of the woods yet. Car makers still don't have enough chips to make enough cars. Gamers can't seem to get their hands on RTX 3090s, and I still can't seem to get a PS5 to play Ghost of Tsushima even though it came out like a year ago. Add to that the fact that countries like Malaysia, Taiwan, and Vietnam, home of the world's microchip factories, are seeing a massive surge in COVID-19 infection rates, which is leading to more widespread lockdowns. And that means that the outlook for recovery from this chip shortage is looking dimmer and dimmer. Surely, at some point, we will get past this. Chip makers will eventually catch up, and car makers will slowly bring production back up to meet demand. And if there are enough new cars being made, then the insane demand for used cars and their insane prices will eventually fall back to where they used to be, right? Well, I'm not sure actually. A few analysts have said that it could be many months after production is normalized for the used car market to come back down to where it was. And it's possible that even after demand is met, used car prices will continue to live at a slightly inflated rate compared to where they were in 2019. So while you definitely shouldn't buy that $25,000 2013 Scion FRS right now, it might not be a $12,000 jalopy again, at least not for a while. So then, as consumers, what lessons can we learn from this whole fiasco? Well, number one is apparently learn computer science so you can program a bot to be able to buy a PS5, because apparently there's no other way to get one. But other than that though, I think the biggest takeaway is to stay informed. There are many people who have unwittingly bought a car for 30, 40, 50% over its real market value simply due to the market that we're in right now. But if we pay attention to what's going on in the world right now and use the tools available to us on the internet to track relevant trends, we can at least make a more informed decision about one of the biggest and possibly most important purchases that we ever make in our lives. And if you absolutely don't need a car right now, then stay patient. Keep driving that old jalopy around, or keep playing your Nintendo Switch with Joy-Con drift because you can't afford a PS5. And just wait until prices and inventory come back to sane levels. But hey, life is short and the supply chain is volatile, so go buy that FDRX7 or that C7 Corvette that you've always wanted. Because if there's anything the last few years have taught us, it's that we don't really know jack squat. Just don't buy a Nissan. That's always a mistake. Thanks again to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. Check out the links in the description to get 86% off a 3-year subscription. Don't forget to hit subscribe and comment below for a chance to win $1,000. And hey, like the video if you like this great story about how computers basically control our lives right now. Thank God we don't have enough chips for the robot overlords to take over the human race. I'll see you guys in the next one.